Have you ever considered starting a private podcast for your business or for personal use? To be honest with you, before I met Kim, I didn't even know anything about the world about private audio feeds, private podcasting, or the amazing benefits that it can bring to you, to your community, and to your business. This episode is so insightful. I learned so much from my conversation with Kim, and I know you're going to learn a lot from what we talked about too. So I'm going to ask you, are you using private audio feeds to support you in what you're creating in your life and in your business? Are you thinking about how it could be super impactful for your listener or for your client to go on an experience of private audio feeds with you? If you're like me, and if you haven't, you might be missing out on some key benefits that could absolutely skyrocket your podcast to the next level. In this episode, it is part 1 of 4 parts in my series with Kim Tradewell, and we are talking about private podcasting and private audio feeds. She joins me to give us the skinny on all things that we need to know when it comes to this. Kim is an expert in the world of private podcasting and audio overall, and she's going to be sharing in this episode why you should consider a private podcast or private audio feed for your business and for your personal use. We'll also be diving into the ROI of podcasting, exploring the benefits of private audio feeds, and we're going to talk about the main differences between a public podcast and a private audio feed. Kim is going to explain how these different feeds work, where they're hosted, and whether it's possible to have both a public and a private feed at the same time. Kim's business journey started as a call for something more. Her career in population health allowed her to look at things with a holistic lens, identifying big picture initiatives and creating messaging for targeted populations from concept to implementation. She realized that there was only so much change that she could make from her cubicle. I definitely resonate with that because I felt the exact same way when I was leaving my corporate job. May and James Co. began with the intention of sharing the creativity of audio marketing with others. She believes the power of collaborating and networking through storytelling is key to success. Through a strategy that is as unique as you are, her role is to bring the care and attention that you need to amplify your voice and to help your business thrive. Your clients are busy. You are busy. Your clients want to learn from you, and this is why they are in your world. But they also have families. They also have businesses. They also have personal lives and households to run. Meet your people where they're at, and you can do this with private audio feeds. This episode is going to provide you the valuable insights into the world of private podcasting and how it can benefit you in your business. So if you're ready and you're excited, be sure to subscribe to the podcast so that you never miss an episode, and leave a rating and review where you're listening right now, whether that's on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts. And if you want to share it with another podcaster or business owner that you think is going to be very much benefiting from this conversation, I would be so grateful for that. It just helps spread the word and helps us reach even more amazing entrepreneurs just like you. All right, let's get into this one with Kim. Hi, Kim. Welcome to As It Relates to Podcasting. I'm very excited to have you here today.
Oh, I'm excited to have this conversation too. Thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, we're going to have so much fun. This is going to be such a great conversation. I know we're going to get a lot out of this, and I'm really excited to talk private podcasting with you because I don't really know a whole lot about this. So I feel like I'm going to be learning throughout this 4-episode series along with our listener today. We're all going to be learning at the same time. So I'm so excited for you to share your expertise. So Kim, everyone knows a little bit about you because I read your bio in our intro. And I want to know right off the cuff before we get started, what do you love so much about private podcasting?
I think it's just a cool way to enter the field of audio without having to do a traditional podcast, because podcasting is amazing, but it's not for everyone. But audio assets, creating them in a way that makes sense for you and your business is. And so I can't wait to dive into all the different ways that you can potentially use them and really just have fun and be creative with it, because it can add a ton of value to your business.
That is so key. I like that you take the audio-based approach, and I think that's a very unique spot to be in and not something that a lot of podcasters focus on, a lot of creators focus on. Like, of course, everyone wants to have good sound. Everyone wants to sound good when they're on the mic and all of that, right? But I think what becomes a little bit challenging sometimes for creators is like, okay, I have the audio and I'm going to do some editing and what have you. And then that's just kind of it. You know what I mean? When we don't really think about the power that audio itself has in the greater scheme of what we're creating on a day-to-day basis, whether it's a podcast, whether it's a conversation or what have you. So let's talk a little bit about podcasting itself to start us off. This first episode, we're diving into why people should consider a private podcast and how that helps you grow and scale your business. So with that in mind, let's talk about the long-term strategy that is a podcast. Does it pay off? And how much work do we actually have to put into it?
I love this question. Okay. So let's start with like why. And I think your listeners have heard this before from other guests for sure. But my take on it is if you want to be able to build and scale your business in any capacity, you need to be able to have a visibility plan. So you need to figure out what platform you're going to choose to show up on. So you have to decide, are you a writer? Are you going to be blogging on the regular? Are you a video person? Are you going to show up on YouTube or create video as part of your marketing plan? Or is audio where you want to lean into? And so if you pick one of those three main platforms, then you just have to be really consistent and really develop a strategy plan around that. And I know we'll get into that a little bit more, but that is the key piece to be able to build and scale. Showing up and doing it in a way that gets you excited and lights you up so that you are showing up consistently, because that is the other key piece, right? Is being consistent. So I think the other thing is that audio just really allows for a deeper connection point. And I love the art of storytelling. And that's something that can really be highlighted through audio. So audio, of course, is my platform. That's what we're going to be talking about. That's a platform that I lean into and I help clients lean into. And I do hear this question a lot, what's my return? What's my ROI if I put in all this time and energy? Well, how much time and energy are you sinking into your content for social media? That's the question that I love starting out with, because if you're spinning the hamster wheel and you're getting burnt out from trying to create content on the regular there, why not create content through a key strategy through your audio platform and make that the hub of everything else, so that you don't have to show up all the time on social media, and that you create deeper connections through your podcast or your audio asset, whatever you so choose. And then in turn, it will lead into, money in the bank is essentially what we want it to turn into, right? We want deeper connections. We want engaged audience so that we can start creating these leads and start creating excitement around who we are and what we do. That's when you'll see your ROI. And it can happen quickly for some people, and some people it takes a little bit longer. But whatever platform you choose, it is a long-term strategy. Each one of those are a long-term strategy. So you have to jump into one of them. And today we'll be talking about audio, and then really build a strategy around that so that you can see that ROI a little bit quicker, so that you get excited about who you're working with again.
That is so golden. There are so many nuggets in there that I want to touch on. Two of them right off the bat that stand out to me the most. The first one where you said, how are you going to show up in the online space? Are you writing? Are you blogging? Are you audio? Are you video? What are you doing? And I think this goes back to a really critical point that a lot of marketers, newer marketers, I want to say, might miss a little bit, is this idea of having that core piece of content, right? So you need that piece of content that streamlines and grounds everything else that you're creating. So I prefer podcasts as well, similar to you. I learn by listening. I try and read. I am not a great reader. Like, obviously I can read, but I read one page of a book and I fall asleep. You know what I mean? So audio lends itself really well because you can listen to audiobooks. You can listen to stories. You can listen to conversations and learn from people in that way. And then on the flip side of that, you have social media. I don't know if you feel the same way, Kim, but I don't like, I need to reframe this for myself. I, in the past, have not loved showing up on social media. I find it sometimes to be like a little bit of a waste of time, like not in a way of like, I consume instead of create, So it's like, you got to put boundaries on that a little bit. But I find when you have a podcast video podcast, audio podcast, well, that's the thing too. I wonder, like, sometimes I'm like, are we calling a video podcast now? Because it's kind of like hand in hand, but a true podcast is audio, right? And so in any case, I like having that main core piece of content that I can now take and use for social media content when I don't feel like showing up online, when I don't feel like writing, what quote am I going to pull out today? What clip am I going to share today? It's like, okay, I have podcast content that I can fall back on for those days where I still want to show up and be able to educate and be able to share and entertain. And also maybe my energy isn't there to do that. So I think that's like a way to get that ROI and add back to that bottom line without burning yourself out and without doing things that are out of alignment and like out of integrity for your own self,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, good copy is fantastic. Great. Good copy is amazing, but hearing someone's voice, their excitement and what really lights them up through like, that storytelling piece, like that's where that magic happens as well. So also really being able to tap into that piece of your marketing strategy is pretty amazing when done well.
I love that. Okay, so with all of this in mind, we are going to touch on throughout our series the different ways that it adds to your bottom line and how to use private podcasts. I want to talk first about private audio feeds. So if you could just tell us, how do they work? How are they that amazing entry point into the world of podcasting, like you were saying? And can you do this with little to no experience?
Yes. Yes and yes. So many good
great.
things
Done.
there. So many good things there. That's it. It answers it. Well, I think we overcomplicate everything, right? I think we try to overcomplicate every process. And, you can DIY everything, or you can hire someone like us that can kind of skip you past all of like the, DIY steps and gets you right into action. But honestly, you just need a pair of headphones and a microphone. I know I have clients and know other people that use their phone and use their voice memos on their phone, and they just started and created a private feed that way. So honestly, don't let the tech and all the things overwhelm you. Just start and just try and just play with it to see if it's the platform that you are comfortable in. And again, like I said, where it's somewhere where you're going to continually show up, because that's what you want. So private feeds are amazing, great entry point into the world of audio, because you can do it in so many different ways, which we'll get into. It really gets me excited because I don't think enough people know about private feeds and how you can really tap into them into your business and what that can look like. So the cool thing about them is that it's, a traditional podcast can be anywhere from 5 minutes in length to over an hour, 2 hours. I mean, there's so much right? And I like working with my clients in seasons so that a traditional podcast isn't completely overwhelming, so that, we can kind of break it into chunks and they can take breaks. So you can definitely do that with a traditional podcast, but a private feed too, I like looking at it as like almost like a mini podcast, because and that way almost it doesn't seem overwhelming for new people that are entering this world. So they're traditionally, they can be varied in length, but they can be anywhere from like 3 minutes in length to 10, 15 minutes. I haven't seen or listened, I should say, to many that are longer than 15-minute episodes, because it is a mini capsule. So it's really, you have like the beginning, the middle, and the end. And the end is the conclusion part where you wrap and tie everything up in a bow. And we'll get into a little bit more of that in more detail later. But it's just really cool because then you can literally, plan it, strategize it, and then record and have it published. And then you don't have to go back to it. Like it can be like set and forget. Whereas a traditional podcast, you have to constantly be feeding into, okay, what, are you doing solo shows? Are you doing guest shows? And who's on the mark, you have to constantly be doing it. Whereas a private feed, you can literally have it done and completed depending on what you're using that private feed for. So that's one piece of it. The other piece of what sets it apart, like what makes it different than a public podcast. So the first thing is that it's not discoverable. So from the user end, a private podcast feels and operates the same. But from the host perspective, there are things that are a little bit more interesting in the back end that you can implement and you do with a private feed that you can't do with a public feed. So private podcasts are unique because you have a unique RSS feed that goes to a specific person. So you have control on who listens and for how long, which is also super key to this piece. Yeah, super cool. And the other piece of it, because you have that unique RSS feed, you have access to more data. So think about what you can use when you really are tapping into what are people engaging in, what are the most downloads on which pieces of those private are those, when I said a mini private podcast, which episodes are people really engaging in? And then you can like lean into those sections more for the next one. So like so many cool ways you can do it.
So what would be the main difference between why someone would want to do a private podcast versus a public podcast? Because you're not able to be discovered through a private podcast. And I know we're going to talk more about exactly how to use private podcasts as part of your business, but would you say that people that want to do a private podcast are either A, like you said, wanting to just sort of get their feet wet and see if it's for them? And then is it something that's more targeted and like specific to a niche? Like, so you wouldn't typically see guests on there, like that kind of stuff. So it's not, do you find it's more like educational in style, less entertainment in style, or could it still be both?
Oh, I think there's so much possibilities for both.
Okay.
So much. But the other piece of what sets it apart is that you can really develop exclusive content. Right? So something a little bit more specific to, let's say, and I know we'll get into this, but in different ways that you can use private feeds. But, you can have them released all at once, just like a traditional podcast, or you can have them dripped out on date base. You can make it exclusive and only say it's only going to be available for 3 weeks or 3 days. So you're driving urgency to that feed. And so there's so many pieces to it, right? So if you're driving people and you're making it exclusive,
really cool.
Yeah, you want it to be part of your customer journey into something, right? So like, let's set up an example. Let's say I want to set up a private feed to lead people into my new course or my new membership. So let's say instead of doing a live webinar, I decide to do a private feed that is, I really, market and promote and talk about on my social feeds, on my newsletters, to my email list. And then I'm driving traffic, I'm driving listeners to this feed for the 3 days that it's open, driving excitement that way so that they can hear me, they can listen to me, they can feel my excitement through my voice. It's so different than a traditional opt-in or a traditional live webinar, because you're also allowing people to listen to you and to listen to the content on their time. Because that's the other piece, is that people are busy and we have to meet our people where they're at. So audio and creating a private feed into this funnel allows a different opportunity. It allows accessibility that a live webinar just doesn't allow for. So if I get them in there, they follow, I have them, tap into an email subscription, then the email sequence gets released, and you can just see where this can go, right? Because there's just so many opportunities with how you can create and design it. So it just really opens up opportunity for so many different ways to use audio. But we will get into more examples for sure on how you can use it. But I really wanted to highlight that, it is not searchable. You are in control in who listens to it and in what way. So I want you to really think about that when we're talking about examples of how you can use it in your business, because it's super cool.
Okay, genius. I'm obsessed with this right now. My brain is firing in so many different ways of how this could be leveraged for business, for fun, for entertainment, for whatever. There's so much opportunity. And, Kim, we keep saying, we're going to get into it. We're going to get into it. We're going to get into it. And we are going to get into it. We're just getting into it on the next episode. So I have to shamelessly plug, if you want to just binge this content right now, you can go to my Patreon, and all of the episodes are going to be live and available. Everything is available at the beginning of the month, so you can just binge through the content. So if you just want to get through all of the amazing stuff that Kim is sharing today, you can just join us on there. There's more stuff that you get by being on there too, but you can for sure get access to all of this in advance, which I think is just mind-blowing, because it's I haven't been on the edge of my seat in a podcast interview in a very long time. So
That's
this
good.
is
That's good.
so exciting. I love this so much. I think there's so much opportunity here. Okay, we're going to touch a little bit on where these are hosted really quick. And we'll talk a little bit more about like the business side. And I think that'll lead us really nicely into our next episode of exactly how to use this content and where. So Kim, where would this type of podcast, private podcast, where would it typically be hosted?
So there are different platforms for sure. And I probably should have done a little bit more research before I got on this call today, because I have my favorite one that I really lean into. I think even like a year and a half, 2 years ago, private feeds weren't as accessible to be able to host it as easily as they are now, I should say, if that makes sense. So when people were using them and trying them, it was just a little bit more difficult. So people weren't tapping into it. And not only difficult, but expensive to be able to have a private feed, and not so much anymore. There are more and more platforms where you can host a traditional podcast and also a private podcast as well. I mean, my favorite is Hello Audio. So I like them because you can do both, and they have different tiered options, but there's lots of different platforms now that you can use and tap into. And maybe what I can do before this airs is find out a couple more outside of Hello Audio for your listeners to be able to at least do a little research on and find out where their cost entry goes into. I love Hello Audio because it was really created for creators. You know, they created that platform so that, you know, people could come into their world that were really, the whole concept and idea behind it was for course completion rates to be increased. Right. And I love that concept because we put in all this time and energy to all this great value. And if we don't have the end user actually completing it, what's the point? Because then A, they're not showing success and being successful. And B, they're not even going further in our journey or being successful in their own way. So at the end of the day, we want whoever comes into our world to be as successful as possible. And audio and creating different accessibility points for them to, you know, consume all this content is one way to do that. And so that's why Hello Audio was really came about. So I love them. They're just so great to work with. But yeah, it's a really cool option. And, you know, you mentioned Patreon, and I think that is a cool piece that I definitely, and maybe that was something that you were going to lead me into, but the cool thing about private feeds too is that they can be free or paid. Right. So you can set it up behind a paywall through just like a traditional, like a course would be, or a paid webinar, or paid, you know, like whatever you're doing, you have a system in place or a sequence, right? So you first are capturing emails, then you know, they're paying through some kind of platform, whether it's Thrivecart or whatever your platform is. And then they get the email with the RSS link where they can listen on any of their favorite media players. So it's the same as a public podcast, but it's just set up a little bit differently.
That is very, very interesting. I love that. So essentially, and this might be a little bit of a clarifying question, could you set up a private podcast feed and also have the option for it to be public as well? Like, could you have both?
Well, you could.
Or is it
you just
completely separate, like, technology?
Well, no, it's the same technology, same platform. You would just put it in another area behind. It's the same as like Anchor or whatever. There's just two options. You have your private feeds and your public feeds. And so you could offer them both in different ways for sure.
Okay. So Kim, you were saying earlier that you were going to get some resources together in terms of, you know, which types of feeds to or softwares or platforms rather to look at or to look into. And I think you have a download that you're going to share, and we'll put in the link in the show notes as well, right?
Yes, absolutely. I'll have like a bit of a pros and cons list of some different platforms that you can do your research on your own, or you can like tap into this PDF and check it out and make some quick decisions.
Amazing. I'm really excited about that. I can't wait to get my hands on that. Okay, let's round out our conversation today, Kim, before we head into our next episode. Let's talk a little bit about on the business side and how this helps position you as that expert in your field. And I'm really excited to get into the ways in which you can use a private podcast in your business strategy or your creator strategy overall.
Yeah. So again, I think it just goes back to how are you generating leads in your business right now, right? And currently, and is it working? So how many hours are you spending on, I'm going to pick on Instagram, but like how many hours are you sinking into one social media platform, and is it paying off? Because I think that's the thing at the end of the day, as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, we need to look at our numbers. We need to look at our new leads. We need to look at how much time and energy we're spending in different areas. And you have to see if that's paying off for you. And if it isn't, you need to switch gears a little bit and see what platform could set you up for success and have that return of investment a little bit quicker. Because at the end of the day, we want to have those deeper connections and relationships with our new ideal clients. And that's the key there too, is we want to work with people that get us, and what a better way to get to know who we are, what we do, and in what way, other than creating an audio feed that explains all the different ways that we work with our clients and all the different ways that, we have seen success and what lights us up and gets excited. And audio is a fantastic way to be able to do that quickly. So if you're thinking about adding audio into your business, into your world, definitely consider tapping into all the different ways you can use private feeds or audio in general.
Amazing. Kim, I'm really excited to get into like the nitty gritty and how to actually do this.
Yes.
But thank you very much for joining me on this first episode of the show. I think this is going to be epic.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening in to this episode with Kim. If you like what you heard, please be sure to leave a rating and review of the show and connect with us on social media so that you can share what you learned and a big takeaway maybe from this conversation. Kim is such a wealth of knowledge when it comes to the audio space, and I know that you learned so much from her because I learned so much from her every single time we sit down and chat. If you'd like to connect with her, with myself, or grab any of the resources that we mentioned in this episode, or any of the resources that we both offer, you can check the notes in the show description. Thanks again for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe, share with a friend that you know needs to hear this episode, and I will see you on the next one.